Now that the New York Giants schedule is out, what's a realistic record for the team in 2025? Find out next, coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, as I promised you yesterday, those of you who caught the episode yesterday when we went over the schedule, I'm going to go through the Giants 2025 schedule and give you my predictions for each game. Now, granted, this isn't something, an exercise that I really like to do because so many things can go into whether or not a team's going to win or lose. There's injuries, there's weather, there's all kinds of things. So this is a very, very, very early look at how the Giants season might play out. Now, spoiler alert, I tend to be optimistic. I try to be realistic. I think I accomplished both with this prediction. So if you're sitting there saying, how many wins could you possibly have? 3 wins or no wins at all? Then you might be a little disappointed in this episode. But if you're willing to stick with me, you will see what I picked and why I am leaning in that direction. So with that said, let's jump into it. All right, week 1, Washington Commanders. I had the Giants losing that game. Okay, I know, not the best way to start off a season, but hear me out on this. For the last 2 seasons, the Giants have come out of the gate flat, whether that's because of injuries, whether that is because of how head coach Brian Daboll has set up training camp, whatever the reason might be, they have come out flat. Now, it is my hope that this summer, Brian Daboll is a little bit more aggressive with training camp. And by that, I mean, a lot more 11-on-11s, which, to be fair, we saw more of last year. But I'd like to see the starters and the key reserves play a little bit more in the preseason. That's been the one thing that Brian Daboll hasn't done really well the last 2 years. And as a result, the Giants come out of the gate and they look very sluggish. They don't look ready for the season. And I'm sorry, you just can't take that approach that, the first 2 games are throwaways, they're an extension of the preseason. No, sorry, guys. The first 2 games of the season count towards your record. And when you've got back-to-back games against divisional foes and you're trying to win the division, you better not throw those away. So anyway, I think the Giants will lose week 1 against Washington, again, because they're just going to come out of the gate slowly. That's just my gut feeling. So, all right, week 2 at Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Giants haven't beaten the Cowboys since the 2020 season, and they haven't beaten Dallas in Dallas, I think, for 8 years. And some of those losses have just been flat out ugly. But you know what? All good things must come to an end. That's right. I'm picking the Giants to win this game. I think with a better offense, better, quarterback play. I'm still not sold on the Cowboys offense. And quite honestly, the Cowboys, I'm not really sure what they did this offseason as far as improving their roster. I wasn't really impressed with their draft. I wasn't impressed with what they did in free agency. I mean, who knows? Maybe Jerry Jones knows what he's doing. He certainly, I would think he would, given that he does more of it, plays more of the GM than I can ever play. But I think this is the year the Giants finally snap the dominance that Dallas has had over them. Dallas having the longest winning streak over the Giants. So that's going to stop. All right, week 3, Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Now, historically, we know that the Giants don't play well in under the lights. I don't know why that is. Maybe like me, they hate night games. I honestly don't know. But for this one, that's right. Sit down, folks. I'm predicting an upset win in this one. What is it? You're probably thinking, what is she smoking? Folks, hear me out on this. There's a couple reasons why I think the Giants will win this game. All right. Um, First off, the Chiefs are playing the Eagles the week before. And we all saw how the Eagles beat them up in the Super Bowl. That's going to be a hard fought game for Kansas City. I can't imagine that the Eagles won't deploy the same tactics that they used against Patrick Mahomes in that offense. And oh, by the way, that kind of leads into the second point. The Giants beefed up their defensive front, much like what the Eagles had in the Super Bowl. And you saw how well, the Eagles were able to beat the Chiefs up with that defensive front. Well, the Giants finally got wise. They addressed the trenches. And I just think, between the Chiefs facing the Eagles and then facing the Giants the week after, even though it's going to be a primetime game, which again, the Giants don't do well with, I think the Giants can sneak away with a win on this one. I really do. It's a long shot. I get it. It's a tiny sliver of hope, but I think it can happen. Okay. Week 4 at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. I have this one as a loss. Now, I think, for those of you who watched the show yesterday, I mentioned that the Chargers are the only team the Giants have not beaten in this century. Not that they faced them a whole lot, but in the games that they have faced them, they haven't beaten them. The thing that kind of concerns me a little bit here, and I know this is going to sound like a contradiction to what I just said, but hear me out on this. The Chargers have a really good running game. And although the Giants beefed up their defensive front, I got to see that this is a better run defense. All right. I think it will be, but until I see it, I'm operating kind of off of last year's results, which weren't very good for the run defense. So I'm calling this one a loss right now, which would give the Giants a 2-2 record after the first month of the season. All right, I'm going to go into the second month of the season, October. Week 5 against the New Orleans Saints at New Orleans. Now, the Caesars Superdome has always been something of a house of horrors for the New York Giants, for whatever the reason. It's just bad things happen down there. But, folks, I'm calling this one a win. All right? Now, why am I calling this one a win? Despite the fact that the Saints have a new head coach in Kellen Moore, and sometimes a new coaching staff can catch teams off guard. Who's playing quarterback for the Saints this year? All right, now, as Giant fans have seen, if you don't have good quarterback play, guess what? You are probably not going to get very far. And I'm not saying that the Saints have shoddy quarterback play. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of them, but they have a lot of inexperience. And, you put that inexperience up against the Giants' pass rush, I would think the Giants might have a good day. The Giants' defense would have a really good day against the Saints down in New Orleans, even though that building is super loud. I mean, gosh, sitting in the press area, you have to put earplugs in if you want to hear yourself think. That's how loud it can be. But I think the Giants pull this one off in New Orleans. All right. Week 6, Philadelphia. Thursday night football. I'm giving this one a loss. Okay. And the reason why I'm giving it a loss is short work week for the Giants. They just don't do well on Thursday night football from the short work week. And again, going back to the run defense, until I see otherwise, that the Giants have plans for, a plan to slow down some of the better running backs that they're going to face, then, I'm not sure I can roll with them against good running teams. And, when you think of the Eagles, you think of old friend Saquon Barkley, who last year ran wild against the Giants in that one game that he played. So to me, I think the Giants in this one can keep the game close, but I just have that gut feeling that the Eagles are going to pull it out and send the Giants to, at this point, what will be a 3-3 record. All right, coming up next, we've got the next 6 weeks on the schedule, so don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip off gets closer, and their last minute deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all-in pricing means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. And whether you're looking for tickets to sports events, theater, comedy, concerts, or whatever, Game Time has you covered. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and I'm going through the Giants 2025 schedule, giving you my predictions, my very early predictions on whether the Giants win or lose and what their final record is going to be. So, after the first segment, I had the Giants through 6 games at 3-3, right? I think a lot of us would sign up for that, wouldn't you? I mean, I know I would, but all right, let's get into weeks the next 6 games on the schedule. So that would be 7 through 12. We'll start with the Denver Broncos. Now, the Denver Broncos, I had that game as a loss. All right. They're one of those teams that, you look at them and it's very easy to sleep on them, and I think if you do that, you're going to be, upended. Now, that game's storyline obviously is going to be the return of Russell Wilson to Denver, to face Sean Payton, who basically didn't want him or didn't feel that Russ Wilson was a fit for the offense. And of course, they went with Bo Nix, who was pretty impressive last year. He led the Broncos to a playoff berth. The Broncos, just they're a team you can't sleep on. And the Giants, it's not quite a cross-country trip, but it's a long trip. Now, granted, they will be coming off of a little extra rest. They'll have 10 days rest coming off the Thursday night game. But I just think this is one of those games where maybe you would say, well, they should beat the Broncos, but I just don't think they're going to. Just a gut feeling. I think, keep an eye on Peyton, who's a great play caller. And, of course, Nix, who has been executing the offense very well. But here's the other reason why I think it might be a struggle for the Giants. The Giants are going to probably want to throw the ball, chuck that ball down the field, and they're going up against this defense, which last year was a top 7 pass defense, and they have since added to it. Let's see how that plays out. Okay, that's going to be an interesting scenario to play out. So I've got it as a loss. So, all right, week 8 at Philadelphia, another place which has been a house of horrors. Now, I think this one, believe it or not, I think the Giants might pull this one off and win this one. Why? Well, the Giants are facing the Eagles twice in a 3-week span. And typically when you have that, you don't really change things up too much because you really don't have the time. And usually the personnel is kind of the same, unless there's like a catastrophic injury rash. So, ideally you would like to see the Giants sweep the season series with the Eagles, but I could see them maybe starting a little bit, starting to the point where let's split the season series. If we could split it against the defending Super Bowl champion, we could come out with a win. So I mean, the Eagles, they've lost a few more players, but Howie Roseman always does a great job putting together a roster. But I think the Eagles maybe, as of right now, maybe lost just a tiny bit of what we saw last year. And plus, here's the other thing with the Eagles. Typically, they come on stronger in the second half of the season. That's when they really pick it up. For whatever the reason, like in the first half of the season, the Eagles tend to come out of the gate, they hold their own, but they're not as strong as they are later in the season. So the hope is that because the Giants are facing them so early in the season, maybe they can split the series. So I have that game as a win, which would give the Giants a 4-4 record. All right, 49ers, week 9. The 49ers, to me, it just seems like that window was closing for them. Christian McCaffrey's getting up there in age. Who knows what they're going to do with the quarterback situation out there. This is a team, the 49ers, that used to have the Giants number. If you remember a couple of years ago, they absolutely destroyed them. I think it was week 3 of the season or week 4, but it was a big loss. That was the year that Daniel Jones ended up getting, the ACL injury. He had the neck injury. Saquon Barkley was missing from that 49ers game. But I don't think the 49ers, I just think their window was closing now. Can the Giants stand toe-to-toe with them? I think they can. And I have them winning this game, actually. It's a home game for the Giants, so they don't have to, go all the way out across the country to California to play it. The 49ers have to, bring it in here. I just think the Giants might upset the 49ers there. I'm sure the 49ers are going to be favored. I'm sure all the teams on the schedule are going to be favored until the Giants show otherwise. But I've got the Giants winning and going to 5-4 in week 9. All right, week 10, Chicago Bears. Despite the fact that the Bears have a new head coach in former offensive coordinator Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sold on their quarterback situation. I think Caleb Williams can be a very good quarterback, but I'm just not sold on him right now. Not certainly after not last year. Now, was that because of the coaching situation? Possibly, maybe Ben Johnson can unlock Caleb Williams's potential. But, Caleb Williams is still a young quarterback. He's going to be going through learning a new system. And, by now, by this point in the season, you would like to think that he is going to have a grasp on it. But I just think the Giants can top them. I think they could take the Bears. I'm putting this one down as a win and giving the Giants a 6-4 record as of this point. Week 11, Green Bay Packers. You know what? The Packers are a team that, you look at and you say, yeah, they're not, overflowing with superstar talent. But, Jordan Love, very good quarterback. The Packers have been in the playoffs. They've been near the top of the NFC for the last few years. They're solid. All right. I think they're really solid, despite whatever postseason struggles they've had. You might say, well, put a win here for the Giants because the last time they faced them on Monday Night Football, by the way, the Giants upset Jordan Love and the Packers. I got this one as a loss. I think this is a type of game where you'd like to think the Giants should win this one, but they're just not going to. Early, and again, it's an early prediction, just kind of going through it and kind of getting the vibe. That's what I see happening. All right, week 12, Detroit Lions at Detroit Lions. I have this one as a loss. Yeah, sorry, guys. The Lions, even though they're starting over with 2 brand new coordinators, their roster is solid. They've made some upgrades to that roster. The Lions that, we saw it in the preseason, how, tough they are. The Giants are tough too, don't get me wrong, but you're in for a brawl when you go and you play the Lions. It's just going to be that kind of a game. And I'm not saying that, the Giants won't match the intensity. I think they will. I just think the Lions probably right now have a slightly better roster than the Giants, just in certain areas. There are questions that I still have about the Giants roster, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But right now, I got to say that, I got to give the edge to the Lions and their roster. So I have that as a loss, and that brings the Giants to a record of 6-6. All right, coming up next, the final third of the Giants 2025 roster. What's the final record going to be? You're going to find out when I get to week 18 coming up right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. and I'm going through the Giants 2025 schedule and just giving you a very, very early prediction on each game. I hope on some of these, I hope I'm right. And some of them, I hope I'm wrong. I'm trying to be optimistic, but also realistic and not look at this with rose colored glasses. So you're probably going to disagree with a lot of my picks, and that's fine. You're probably going to disagree with the final record I have for the team, which you're going to find out at the end of this segment, and that's fine. But hey, it's my opinion. If you guys want to weigh in with your opinions, those of you who are watching on YouTube, drop a comment in the box below. If you're listening on the audio platforms, you can always send over an email and let me know what you think. All right, let's get back to it. The bottom 6 games, the final 1/3 of the season. We're going to kick it off with week 13. New England Patriots on Monday Night Football. Oof. The Giants just don't do well under the lights. That's got to start changing. You can't automatically, see a primetime game on the Giants schedule and say, mark it down as a loss. Eventually that's got to turn. It's been a while since the Giants have been any good during prime time, but that's eventually got to turn. I had the Giants winning this one. All right. Now the Giants are going to get to see Drake May, the quarterback who, as we found out last year on Hard Knocks, that was the quarterback they were trying to trade up to get if they couldn't get Jaden Daniels, which I think they knew they weren't going to get. But new system for Drake May, new head coach up there, and Mike Vrabel, all new system that he's learning. At this point in the season, again, they should be more in tune. But, the other thing I wonder about with this one, Mike Vrabel, as you guys know, used to have Shane Bowen on his staff. So the big question becomes, how much of Shane Bowen's defense is his own versus what he did with Vrabel? And does Vrabel have an advantage in knowing maybe some of the nuances of what Shane Bowen does? Or is it vice versa? I think the Giants pull this one out. All right. I think, Bowen notwithstanding, I think the offense is going to come and they're going to deliver the goods here. So I have the Giants winning this game, which means as they get into week 14, which is their bye week, the Giants will have a 7-6 record. All right. Looking good, right? All right. Some of you are probably saying, okay, that's it, right? There can't be any more wins. Stay tuned. Okay. Week 15 coming out of the bye. Washington Commanders. The Giants, I don't see them, losing the season series to the Commanders. Now, you remember in week 1, I had them losing. In week 15, the Giants are going to win this one. All right. This is a home game for the Giants, the first of 3. Yeah, the first of 3. Actually, let me back up there. In their last 4 games, they have 3 at home, and this is the first one that is going to be at home. Actually, have 2 in a row. So I think the Giants split the series with the Commanders, and they win this one because they're going to be rested. And look, this is going to be a key time for the Giants. They have to finish the season strongly if they are to, even have a remote possibility of a wild card berth, and maybe they do. I don't think they'll win the division, but if they can aim for a wild card, I know that's an ambitious sounding goal, but I think a lot of us would take that if they could pull that off. All right, week 16, Minnesota at home. I've got that one as a win for the one simple reason. All right, but before I give you that reason, note that this is the 4th time in the last 4 years the Giants are facing the Vikings, and the 2nd year in a row. So Minnesota will come in with 2nd-year quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who, remember, last year did not play because he missed the entire season due to a knee issue. All right. So in a way, he's kind of still a rookie. And if the Giants can't make life uncomfortable for J.J. McCarthy, then I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, I would think, with a young quarterback, look, there's only so many things they could pick up through practice reps and film study and the classroom. You got to get out there at some point. You got to face the pressure. You got to face, you got to come out of that scripted or that protective bubble that a lot of quarterbacks are in, especially the young quarterbacks. And you got to face the real world. I think the Giants can beat JJ McCarthy at that point. So I'm feeling good about it. I'm feeling good about that one. So, all right. So that would give the Giants, let me see, a 9-6 record. Yep, 9-6, right? So they were 7-6 week 13. Week 14 was the bye. 8-6 with a win over Washington. 9-6. Yep, 9-6. Okay, sounded good, right? All right, week 17, Las Vegas Raiders at the Raiders. I'd like to think the Giants could beat the Raiders. I'm not feeling good about this one. I think this one's a loss. Geno Smith is the quarterback over there. Pete Carroll's the quarterback. When Pete Carroll was with the Seahawks, generally his teams did pretty well against the Giants. I don't think the Giants pull this one off. This is a game I think that the Giants should win, but there are games on the schedule where you're going to say, or you're going to look back and you're going to say, well, they should have won this game, or they shouldn't have won this game, but they did. And I think this is one of them where you're going to say, this is a game they should win, but I don't feel good about this one for some reason. So, all right, week 18. All right, after the Giants fall to 9-7 in week 17, week 18, the regular season finale, Dallas Cowboys. By this point in the season, it is very possible that a wild card berth could be on the line for both the Cowboys and the Giants. All right, I think the division title is going to come down to Washington or Philadelphia. All right. The Giants and Cowboys could be slugging it out for one of the final wildcard spots. Folks, I have the Giants losing this one. And even though the Giants have a 9-8 record to finish the season, I don't think it's going to be good enough to get them into the playoffs. But what it is going to be good enough for is to show improvement. All right. Now, I know that's a very ambitious sounding record prediction. I know there are people out there who, again, feel that the Giants will be lucky if they match last year's 3-win total. But I do think that this Giant team, the roster is better. The key for them is going to be staying healthy, playing more disciplined. Okay. You can't have drive-killing penalties. You can't do stupid mistakes, have drops and, lose your cool or anything like that. But I think we're going to see progress with the Giants. Will it be a 9-8 record? That would be great. If it comes to like a 7-10 record, that wouldn't be horrible either. But I think this is a realistic record. How they get there? Well, that remains to be seen. And of course, we will follow all that for you here on the Locked On Giants podcast once we get into the season. Got a lot more coming up, though, before we get to that point. So make sure you keep it here all next week. Next week's going to be kind of a quiet week, but then the week after, we start OTAs with the Giants. So we'll have media avail. And of course, I'll have all the latest for you from the OTAs. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you as always for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here on Locked On Giants. And we will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody.